Trade deadline day has come and gone, but did the Habs make the right moves? We'll talk about this and more on Hockey Inside Out. Hello and welcome to Hockey Inside Out. I'm your host, Jessica Rusnak. I want to thank Stu Cowan for filling in for me last week. You did a great job, Stu.
Sure to fill.
Joining him on the panel this week, we've got former NHLer, Stanley Cup champ, former assistant coach with the Montreal Canadiens, Rick Green. We also have independent hockey analyst Andrew Berkshire to discuss everything that went down during the NHL trade deadline. Now, the Montreal Canadiens made a few moves. Traded Jake Allen to the New Jersey Devils. What's your assessment of the job that Kent Hughes has done? Did he get enough for Jake Allen? Would you have liked him to see a little bit? Would you have liked to see him make a little bit more moves during that time? Stu, why don't you lead us off?
Well, I think the third round pick was a good exchange, especially considering that Jake Allen didn't play great this year. And I think with the three goalie situation, it reached the point, I wrote a column about this, that you had to just take the best offer on the table at the trade deadline. It made no sense to keep going forward with this three goalie system. It wasn't fair to any of them. As Marty St. Louis said this week, it was harder on Jake Allen than the other two as a veteran, not getting enough playing time or practice time. I think that's why he struggled at times when he was in the goal. So it had reached the point, I understand why Kent Hughes started the season with the three goalies. Now Montembeault wasn't signed. Chance to become an unrestricted free agent at the end of the season. It's still not certain that he could be a number one goalie, right? Caden Primo, he was worried he'd lose him on waivers if he put him down. He had information that he would lose him. And then Jake Allen was sort of the security blanket, right? Worst case scenario, you still have Jake Allen, the veteran around, who's a proven commodity. He didn't get as much as he probably wished he could have got for Jake Allen, but it had reached the point where you had to get something for him, and they just had to move on from this three goalie system. So I think it was a smart move.
Yeah, and I think he got the most he could get at that particular time. Jake Allen, was having a so-so year, and I'm quite sure that there was conversations that were going on, leading up to that deadline to see how he could maximize something for him. And in true Kent Hughes fashion, I know he had conversations with Jake about a possible move, and I guess they had somewhat of an agreement that he had no problem if he was going to move him out of Montreal. And, the issue here, and we talked about a number of times, is this rotation of the three goalies, which was getting old. And, it was just a case of the right situation that presented itself, that he moved Jake Allen. And right now, after the performance of Primo, they looked like brilliant management people with the type of game that Primo had. And but the bottom line out of all of this is time to move on. And he got what the best he could get at that particular time.
Yeah, the goalie market's been soft for years in terms of like what you get back based on or compared to how good the player is, right? And I think Jake Allen is still a good 1B goaltender, good backup. We've talked so much about how great he is for the younger players. That's something that's going to translate in Jersey as well. They're a very young team. It's several years ahead of the Montreal Canadiens in terms of their rebuild. So I think it's a good fit for them and a good fit for Jake Allen. The third round pick, I think, is good. The condition on it seems pretty unlikely because Allen would have to play 40 plus games and the Devils would have to make the playoffs next year. But then I look back and Allen played 42 games last year, 41 starts. So it's not impossible. If the Devils don't get Jacob Markstrom in the offseason, which appears to be the plan, there's a good chance that Jake Allen could end up playing around half the season for them next year. So if that turns into a second round pick, that's a pretty good deal for Kent Hughes. And I think most importantly in this situation, it's now easier for Montembeault and Primo, who've had to deal with this 3-goal situation. And he did right by Jake Allen, right? A really good guy, a really good family that deserves a chance at 34 years old next season to play on a good team, to have a schedule that makes sense, not having to juggle 3 goalies himself. I think Allen was the one who was most frustrated by this situation, and he deserved to play more. Everyone deserved to play more, right? So now everyone gets what they need from the goaltenders, and the Canadiens get a nice little boost and a little bit of cap space too.
And to show how much Jake Allen wanted to move on, he waived. New Jersey is one of the teams on his no trade list, and anybody who's ever been to Newark can understand why that would be the case. So he waived that to make the trade happen. And for people saying, "Oh, it's only a third round pick," the Canadians got Jacob Fowler, who could be their goalie of the future, with a third round pick. So it's not like it's nothing. And the other smart thing that Hughes did is when he traded Sean Monahan, he didn't eat any of the contract, and he only had one spot available to eat money. And he was either going to use it on David Savard or he was going to use it on Jake Allen, right? I think that was the plan. And as I said earlier, they had to move on from this 3-goalie system. He had the ability to eat money on it, and that's what made the trade go through, because the Canadians are keeping half of that salary cap hit.
But do you think that Kent Hughes waited too long with this 3-goalie system? Like, if you think back at the first episode of the season when we were saying this is temporary, it's not going to last long, and then here we are in March, and as you guys have been saying, Jake Allen was willing to go to New Jersey because he wanted to get out of this situation, that maybe the 3-goalie system affected his play. What are your thoughts, Rick? Do you think that this situation should have been addressed months earlier?
Well, I think if Ken Hughes felt that the situation was right, or he could get something back, I'm sure he would have pulled the trigger before. But these conversations go on over the course of the year, and they know very well that they have a plan in place that they like to execute, but it doesn't always play out in their favor. And I think that the timing, of this transaction was one of, okay, this is something that I can grab a hold of right now and get it done. Maybe it wasn't as attractive, earlier on over the course of the year, but they had to address it. They did it, and now it's time to move forward with the 2 goalies that they do have.
Well, it's also possible that Jake Allen wasn't willing to waive the no trade clause to Jersey earlier in the season, and maybe it's the case. I'm speculating. It's the case that Kent Hughes went to him and said, "Look, New Jersey's the trade I have. It's either you go to New Jersey or you stay here." And it was interesting speaking with Caden Primo after the trade. Primo thought the 3-goalie system would last all season. Like he thought it was going to go like this way until the end of the year. Obviously, a big relief for him that it's now down to 2 goalies. But I mean, he had nothing. And anybody who ever talks about Jake Allen doesn't have anything bad to say about him, right? He's the reason why this 3-goalie system worked to a point. I mean, all 3 goalies played pretty well. And it's just because Jake Allen's such a good veteran and such a team guy. And as he said, he hopes after he retires that when this rebuild reaches its conclusion, he wants to watch on TV and watch this team win a Stanley Cup and feel that he was part of it. Like he was part of the first stones that they laid down in this rebuilding plan.
Yeah, it makes sense. And this 3-goalie system, it has to go away. And it makes sense that it took long, because from my impression is that it's the teams that needed a goalie who were hesitant this year. Mm-hmm. It wasn't that the Canadians were trying to hold out for, the crazy package for one of these goalies. It's teams like Edmonton and New Jersey were unwilling to make trades to help their goaltender situation for the entire year. I still think it's honestly mad that the Edmonton Oilers didn't get some sort of security behind Stu Skinner. I know Stu Skinner is playing really well right now, but he's a young goaltender who's collapsed in the playoffs before. So going in with him and maybe calling up Jack Campbell again with the team that they have seems crazy to me, but I'm not Ken Holland.
And Ken Hughes did well by Jake Allen. Like, Jake Allen's a really popular, respected guy, and he treated him well. And the thing with Ken Hughes is, from being a player agent, he's honest with these guys. Like, as I mentioned, I mean, he probably went to Jake, or possibly went to Jake and said, "Look, I know you don't want to go to New Jersey, but it's the only team that's willing to make a trade right now." And he obviously was willing to waive it. So, big change from, Marc Bergevin with his "if you want loyalty, get a dog" attitude towards players. Ken Hughes treats players well, and that players around the league realize that now. And like, Montreal's not, it makes Montreal more of an attractive place to come when this is how players are treated, and veterans especially.
And Ken Hughes, public has said he can't wait for the day when he's and looking forward to buying than selling, and he's obviously working on that to try and get in that situation. But there is time that's going to take to make that a possibility.
He made another good point, though, Rick, too. He said, we're sellers at the trade deadline, but they're buyers at the draft. And they have been. That's how they got Kirby Dach. That's how they got Alex Newhook. And I'm certain that's what he's going to do again this year. That second first-round pick, I'm almost positive, will be traded, maybe packaged with some young defensemen or prospects to try and get a legitimate top six forward, since goal scoring from the forwards is the biggest problem on this team.
Now, one of the players that I was surprised is still with the Canadiens is David Savard, that I thought that he would be one of the players that was traded at the trade deadline. What do you make of that, that he's still with the team? Do you like that he's still with the team, or would you have preferred that Kent Hughes try and trade him to a team and get something for him? Andrew, what do you think?
If you would have asked me at the beginning of the season, I would say that not moving Savard this year was a mistake. But the more that you listen to these players talk about David Savard and how much they admire him and how much they depend on him in that locker room, and frankly, his performance has continued to be very, very strong this year, I don't think it's an issue. I think this was a good move for Kent Hughes. I like the fact that he's basically stood out there and said it's a first round pick or we're keeping him, because if you're not willing to negotiate on a player who's actually helping your team off the ice and on the ice, if you're not willing to go down and teams realize that and they're not willing to pay the price, well, maybe they'll come up to the price when you're going to move him next year. There's still a possibility that he gets moved in the summer, of course. I think they'll probably keep him until next year's deadline. But frankly, I think that you look at their performance in Columbus and who was one of their best players, it was David Savard, while the rest of the team was kind of skating in quicksand. So he's a guy that continually gives his all, and I think it's a good example for the young players. You need some veterans, right? We need one Rick Green on the team.
Not too many.
Not too many.
Well, as Caden Primo said after the game, he says, "I think David Savard made more saves than me." And again, as I mentioned earlier, Ken Hughes set his price, and it was probably a first-round pick, but I'm sure other teams wanted him to eat some of that contract also. And if he was going to trade Jake Allen, it was a case of who do I need to get? Who am I better keeping, Jake Allen or David Savard? And the obvious answer to that is David Savard. Arber Xhekaj has played his best hockey in the NHL the last 10, 12 games, and it's not a coincidence that he's been paired with David Savard during that time. He's just sort of Xhekaj told me, he says anybody can look good playing with him. He's that steady guy. It's like, Rick, when you were playing with young guys, Peter Svoboda, and that steady veteran presence. And as Arber said, he's like a coach he's coaching him on the ice. He's coaching him on the bench. He's coaching him when they're on the plane and on the road. He's the father figure for these young defensemen. And, Jordan Harrison was sort of funny. He's not that old, he's not like old enough to be their dads, but he is the father figure. He's a real popular guy. He's a funny guy. The guys like being around him, and it makes total sense to keep him. I think you're right, Andrew. I think it's maybe in the summer they move him, but I think it's more likely at the trade deadline next year, because that's the last year of his contract. It'd be a pure rental, and maybe he does get a first round pick for him next year. But I think it's as you said, you can't. You hear people saying, "Oh, trade everybody and just get draft picks." Well, you're going to be rebuilding forever. If you just keep bringing in nothing but young prospects, you're going to rebuild forever. You need to keep some veterans around, and you need to keep key veterans around. And David Savard's a key veteran.
And you only have 50 contracts, right? You can't you can't draft 15 players a year and sign them all. Mm-hmm. Obviously, those players can become assets for further moves, but at a certain point, you got to have players too. It can't just be draft picks.
And he's stockpiled. Ken Hughes has 24 draft picks in the next 2 drafts, including 2 in the first round each year. And that's how you rebuild. You say he's not going to use all those draft picks. He's not going to use, I don't think, that second first round pick each year. Maybe not even the first round pick, depending on what he can get in exchange. But that's how you build a team. You draft well, and you make smart trades and bring in, packaging they're loaded on defense. I mean, what a change from the days when Victor Mete was the top defense pairing with Shea Weber. Remember that? They're loaded with young defensemen right now, and that's a nice problem to have. And at some point, they're going to have to move some of them because, as you said, Andrew, there's only so many contracts and there's only so many spots for players to play also.
And I'm sure that Ken Hughes did get some calls about the availability of David Savard. And, in true Ken Hughes fashion, he respected Savard's wishes, saying that he'd like to finish his contract with the Canadiens and not be moved. And, that being said, on 2 fronts, one is respecting Savard, and the other is what he brings to the dressing room and the young players. And there's a guy that we hear bits and pieces about that is a quality guy that you want to have, and he's very, very helpful, obviously, in helping the young guys. And I'm glad for him. I'm quite sure he's happy that he's still part of the Canadiens, as he said he'd like to be. And he does a great job. And it's a bonus to have a guy like that on your blue line.
Yeah, during the time I've been covering this team, this is the best locker room they've ever had. Like, this is by far, it's not even close. This is the best. This is a really, I've said it before, it's like a band of brothers. Like, these guys really like each other. They get along well. They bought into the system that Marty St. Louis is selling. That's why the compete level is as good as it is. And, veterans like David Savard, Mike Matheson, Sean Monahan, before he was traded, they all played key roles in that. And, talking about Kent Hughes setting his price for Sean Monahan was a first-round pick without eating money. And he got it. And he was asked during his news conference last Friday, do you think you made the right decision? And he says, well, I knew what I wanted and I got it, and you move on. Like he said, and with the injury history of Sean Monahan, you have to factor that in too if you worry he's going to get hurt, especially what they went through the year before with Joel Edmondson, who was hurt and they couldn't deal him. They had to wait until the summer and not get what they would have had if he was healthy. So Kent Hughes is a smart guy, and I've said it many times before. You can disagree with some of his moves, but when he explains them or when they're explained to you, it makes sense.
So would you say then it's fair to say that the vision that the Canadiens management has is the right one? Because we've seen in the past different management saying that they're going to rebuild this team and it just never seems to work. Do you finally have faith in the people who are in place right now to turn this franchise around? Rick, what do you think?
Well, I think the indication is there's no panic in their mindset, and they are prepared to pay the price of time and development with quality character guys that are the future. And, they're not looking for a short-term fix. So they're in it for, the long run and developing good young guys that want to be part of the Canadiens. And they're right on schedule, I think, from the standpoint of trying to bring in guys and weed out guys that don't fit in their future. And that's a compliment to them because it's not easy with the way the business is run, but they have a plan in place. They're following it, and I think people really believe in the process and what the future will be.
And this is the first time they've ever done a full rebuild, like ever, right? This team has never, Mark Bergevin sort of patching holes here and there, trying to, hope we get in the playoffs and anything can happen and Carey Price can carry us on his back, which he did a few years ago and brought them to the Stanley Cup final. But this is a full rebuild, and it's only year two. Like, fans have to be patient. Your fans already, Hughes is a horrible GM and Marty St. Louis is a terrible coach. You're going to miss the playoffs for the third year in a row. They're probably going to miss the playoffs again next year. I mean, a rebuild takes time. And one of the things I really caught my ear in Kent Hughes' press conference when he said, I'm looking forward to the time that we're a buyer, not a seller. And I hope I'm around when we get to compete for a cup. As I wrote a comment, because you realize that this might not work. Like, rebuilding in the NHL, a 32-team salary cap league, there's no guarantees. Look at Buffalo. Look at New Jersey. Last year, they 100 and whatever points. This year, they're probably going to miss the playoffs. Buffalo, it's not easy. But he has that confidence in the plan he has. He's confident it's going to work, but he realizes it might not work. And if it doesn't work, he's going to get fired. But he has confidence. Like, Kent Hughes made a lot of money as a player agent. He doesn't need money. This was a challenge for him. That, when Jeff Gordon first contacted him about the job, he said no, he wasn't interested. And then his wife said, "Really? Does he go back home?" And the challenge, and he's embraced this challenge, and he has a plan. He's going to stick to his plan, and if it works, great. And if it doesn't work, well, he'll get fired, and they'll bring somebody else in.
Yeah, like you said, this is the first time they've actually done a full teardown and rebuild. They've been kind of patchworking since the Patrick Waugh trade, right? Trying to fix things on the fly, add players from here or there, free agency when they have a rare opportunity because it hasn't been great for a long time. They almost accidentally rebuilt in the 2007 draft when they lucked into Pacioretty, Subban, and McDonough all in the same draft. Three guys who were flat out stars in the league from one draft is not very common, especially not picking in the top 10. But they weren't able to make that work. They weren't able to build around that team along with Carey Price and other top-end picks. Now they're actually taking a patient approach. So I do believe in what they're doing. And I think one of the things that really makes me believe in them more is every time I feel skeptical about something, they find a way to work that in a way that creates success. The first year of Slavkovsky didn't look good. This year, all of a sudden, things are changing, and they're changing rapidly. Power play, terrible. They start focusing on the power play. Power play is pretty good. They're not scoring at a great clip, but they move the puck extremely well. You look at Caden Primo, thought that he was going nowhere last year. This year, a lot of good performances. Montembeault, his first year, skeptical he could be a good goaltender. All of a sudden, look at him. He looks really good. So all these areas where it seems like maybe they're not right about stuff, they keep proving that they are right, which is why things like David Reinbacher, who's had a really tough year this year in Cloton, a really bad development year with 3 different coaches. I'm not throwing in the towel on that, and I'm skeptical about people who are really upset about that pick because they keep proving themselves right. And I think when you have a management group and a coaching staff that keeps proving themselves correct, you got to give them a little bit of a leash.
And you mentioned that power play, Andrew. Those 5 guys on the first unit, which are fun to watch, they're going to be around for a while. Like they're young guys. I mean, Matheson's the older guy in there, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Canadiens keep him beyond the last 2 years of his contract here if he keeps playing the way he is now. So that's a power play unit that's only going to get better moving forward. And you're right, like the patience is the key in this rebuilding process. And Jeff Molson deserves a lot of credit as the owner of the team for willing to do this, right? I mean, Kane's not making the playoffs, he's losing money. But he realizes that this team was going nowhere, just spinning its wheels, just trying to get in the playoffs, hope something might happen. They want a team that's going to be in the playoffs every year, like the Boston Bruins and teams like that. And that's, if that works, then Jeff Molson's going to be very happy because there's going to be playoffs every year and there's going to be a lot of money coming in. But he's willing to take the pain of not making the playoffs for a few years for what he has confidence in this management group that he's hired, that they will eventually, this rebuild will pay off. And I still think they're a couple of years away from being a legitimate playoff contender. So I think that one more year of, depending what happens at the draft and what trades he makes, but I think they're another year away of not making the playoffs before the year after that. I think they're at a point where they should be able to compete and get in.
All right, moving on to rapid fire. We saw Caden Primo record his second NHL career shutout Tuesday night against the Columbus Blue Jackets when they beat them 3-0. It was the first game he started since Jake Allen was traded to the New Jersey Devils. He said it was just an ordinary game, but do you think that there was a little bit more weight going into this game on him for him to have that kind of performance? Andrew, what do you think?
Maybe, I guess, after the trade, it's like you're free now. You get to be the full-time backup. Let's earn your ice time, right? You can actually get a lot more now. There might have been some of that. He had a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, it looked like. I thought his movement was really, really strong in that game. Great puck tracking. His rebound control is still a little bit iffy, but his athleticism allows him to maintain his position while having the puck kind of shoot all over the place. Young guys, they can do whatever, right? But I really, I liked watching him last night. He was an entertaining performance on top of being a very strong performance. And I'm sure everybody feels good for him. It's been a tough year mentally, I'm sure. He's continually proving that he's a decent goaltender in this league. And I was checking the stats, and he's 6 goals above expectations in terms of saved above expectations this year. 5 last night, or 5 against Columbus. They had 5 expected goals in that game, and he allowed 0. Pretty impressive.
I think it was more a case of relief for him than anything else. I mean, at practice Monday in Brossard, he was moved into Jake Allen's slot, and he looked happy. I don't know if happy is the right word, but he just looked like relieved. Like he looked like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders, like worrying about his future. Am I still going to be in Montreal? What's going to happen? Am I going to get claimed on waivers? Am I going to just all that in his head? And he's been much better this season, and he's talked about he's worked with a mental performance coach. I think that's really helped. But I was happy for him. He's a really nice kid. His teammates really like him. He's a little quiet, a little shy, as Jaden Struble told me. He played with him last year in Laval. But a memorable name. I mean, having his name first star and having fans chanting Primo, Primo, Primo. A big night for him. And, we talked about Mark Bergevin earlier. Looks like a hell of a 7th-round draft pick that could turn out to be. Late-round pick, you're sort of, looking for needles in the haystack at that point. He's looking now like the goalie who won the Mike Richter Award in NCAA hockey as the best goalie in NCAA. And I think for him, he used to look like a deer in the headlights at times. He had bad body language when pucks would go in. He looked like he had no confidence in the NHL. He was a different goalie in the AHL. And I think this season, Marty St. Louis talked, is like the 3 goalie system might have been really good for him in hindsight. Like I think all the practice time, spending extra time with goalie coach Eric Raymond, not sort of like the pressure of playing every 3rd game or 4th game or whatever it might be. You can look at it maybe more pressure the way it was, but for his first start, a lot could change. There's still a few games left to go, but at this point, it's looking like the 3-goalie system might have actually helped Caden Primo. And now that it's over, as I mentioned earlier, he thought it was going to last all season. He was prepared for it to last all season. So I think more than anything, it was just a sense of relief when Jake Allen was traded. And he was like, okay, I actually, with 3 goalies, there's games you're not even dressed, right? You're watching from the press box or whatever. You don't even feel like you're part of the team. At least now, even the games he doesn't play, he's going to be on the bench. He's part of the team. He's moved into like the regular backup goalie spot in the locker room. All that stuff I think adds up and just gives him a sense of relief and some confidence that I really am part of this team now.
And let's face it, a lot of pressure on him to be thrown in to this situation for a guy that everybody expected to be good. He had trouble early on in his starts with a lot of pucks going in on his glove side. A few question marks again about his rebounds and all that stuff. And now that this move has been done with him fitting into the 2 goalie rotation, there's pressure on him, and he responded in a very positive way. And it was interesting now him commenting, even though it's been fairly quick, getting more time in practice and getting a chance to take care of some of the details and highlight some of the details that he needs to improve on. And nothing but good things to say to this point. Now we'll have to see over the course of the remainder of the season how many games he's going to get and how he does respond. And hopefully he'll continue to progress, because as we all know, it's a real tough position. And, now he has to feel the pressure of knowing that he right now is part of the 2 goalie deal, and he has to deliver when he's given the opportunity. So
it was smart for Marty St. Louis to start him against Columbus instead of waiting to put him in against Boston. Although when they put him in against Columbus, I don't think they expected he was going to get 41 shots playing the Blue Jackets.
But one game really doesn't make a season. But do you think that he is ready to be the backup goaltender for this team? Do you see this working out well for him?
Time will tell, right? I mean,
signs are good.
Yeah, it's time will tell him, and that's why I think it was really important to move Jake Allen, because now they have 18 games or whatever it's left, and I imagine he'll start at least 6 or 7 of them, and they'll get a better idea of going into the offseason if he is indeed ready to be the backup to Sam Montembeault. And as Primo said, like, there's a friendly competition between him and Montembeault. They both want to play. So like Caden Primo is happy to be the backup right now, but in the back of his mind, he's probably saying to himself, I want to be number 1 here at some point also.
And it was interesting when he was interviewed saying this is just a start when it comes down to the success that he had, in his game. And, let's let this play out with some games. Let's get a real reading on, how he handles himself. And then they'll make the decision, after he's got some exposure to a number of games, because he's still pretty young, and 1 game is not a great indicator of what's to come. So tough position. We'll see. Sink or swim is in the program for him, and hopefully he'll take care of business, because he seems to be a real nice kid, and now he's got to deliver.
Now, Nick Suzuki is a player who's really kind of come into his own this season, really taking a step forward in his development. What's impressed you the most with his ability this season? Andrew, you want to start?
Yeah, I'm just impressed. At 24 years old, he's still adding nuances to his game. It's not just about refining. He's adding full-on different skills that he hasn't displayed in years previous. And so far in Nick Suzuki's career until this season, he could come into the year, he could be elite defensively, but the offense wasn't really there outside the power play. Or he could be elite offensively, but the defense was falling apart. Now he's doing both at the same time, with a line matching up against opponents' best lines every single night. He's the guy that every single team is circling on the board to check the most, to shut down on the offensive side for the Montreal Canadiens. And, I follow a metric called goals above replacement, which is it is basically built to estimate how many goals, like team goals, a player provides over a fringe NHLer in their role. And Suzuki right now ranks 18th among forwards in the NHL. The 2 forwards on either side of him are Jason Robertson and David Pasternak. Now, if you're able to keep that kind of company in this league, you are a bona fide star player. And I'm prepared at this point, if Suzuki can continue this level of play, he has put himself into star player territory. And that's huge for the Montreal Canadiens because they need stars. And we can debate whether he's like the future number one center for this team, but I think that if he is, it's fine. They just need to have really good depth at center.
His consistency to me is what's just impressive. And, Kent Hughes spoke at his news conference. That's the hardest thing for a young player is being consistent. I'm sure you know that, Rick, better than anybody. And he's consistent. And, he's probably going to finish the season with 30 goals. I don't think any of us thought that when the season started. He the 30-goal scorer who plays both ways. The other thing is impressive. He's winning 53% of his faceoffs this season. That was a problem for him before. He was at 47% last season. So he just... every game, he's getting a little better. And you watch him, he's a defenseman's best friend in the defensive zone. Rick, I'm sure you notice that. You'll see defensemen struggling behind the goal line with the puck, and here comes Nick Suzuki to the rescue, and he comes in and picks up the loose puck or helps out, check a body or box a guy out. He does everything well. And now he's doing faceoffs well also. So he's just and at the age he is, and as a captain and everything that comes with that, he's handled it all really well. And you're right, Andrew. He's a legitimate star player in the NHL. Not a superstar, but he's a star player. He does so many things well, and he's so young, and it's really been impressive to watch him this season.
And it really isn't a fluke that a guy like that, delivers almost a point a game. I mean, these type of stats don't lie. And, you talk about his consistency. I mean, he's doing something right, almost every game to rack up those kind of points and those kind of goals and those kind of opportunities. And then let's not forget to mention how creative he is and smart he is. And, he's just getting better with time and his type of character. And you see how he responds when he plays against some of the top players, in the league, and he goes head to head with them and doesn't look out of place whatsoever. So for a young guy that's able to respond the way he has responded, the type of character that he shows on and off the ice, there's good reasons that we see why he is wearing the C for the Montreal Canadiens, because he is that kind of guy that shows great example, on and off the ice, and a quality person that I have a lot of respect for because he's getting the job done.
And he's just below a point per game, and that's without Cole Caulfield scoring the way you'd expect Cole Caulfield to score. If he was, he would be a point per game player. And the other thing that impresses me is that there's no wasted energy with Nick Suzuki on the ice. That's the reason why he can play as many minutes as he does. He's so smart. He doesn't waste energy. He gets to the right place at the right time. But he's not, as Marty said, he's not working just. He said, if you get out there and work, you're often in the wrong spots. You're not. He's able to see everything that's happening on the ice and anticipate plays. It's just his hockey IQ is off the charts. He's just a really smart, honest, hardworking player, and he never misses a game. He hasn't missed a game since coming into the NHL.
And I think we have to give credit where credit is due. Remember when this trade was made? It was in the early hours before the golf tournament. We knew Pacioretty was going to be out of town anytime soon, and then you get the trade, and it's Nick Suzuki. It's a prospect. It's a name that you don't know, and you're saying, is Marc Bergevin, wasting a player? But it came back, and it worked out really well, and it was an impact player making that move for Marc Bergevin. But
although Suzuki's not the player Bergevin wanted from this originally.
Well, it worked out anyway. Stu, just picking up on something you mentioned before, Cole Caulfield, if he was scoring goals, imagine what Nick Suzuki's stats would be like. Are you concerned with the lack of goal production that you've seen from Caulfield so far this year?
I am. I mean, it's 11 games now he's gone without a goal. He's 8th in the NHL with 250 shots. So it's not like he's not shooting the puck. He'll always shoot. He had 2 or 3 really good chances against Columbus that didn't go in. His shooting percentage last season was 16.5%. This season it's 7.6%. What a drop off. And it's hard to figure out why. It's, I've said earlier in earlier shows that, it was predictable, going that short high side, but he's not that predictable now. he's shooting everywhere, but they're just not going in. So I'm not sure if it's like, did he lose a little zip on his shot from the shoulder surgery? I don't know. Is it the goalies have a better book on him now? It's confusing because like he should be scoring more with the amount of shots he's getting, but for whatever reason they're not going in. And it's really hard to explain. Maybe it's just bad luck.
Yeah, I actually looked into this last week after we talked about it a little bit, and I was like, can we find anything to explain what the heck is going on here with Cole Caulfield? And Frank Corrado actually had a great segment on TSN during the Columbus game, and he went over the shots that Caulfield's been taking lately, and he's like, look, he's getting it off with a lot of power. He's putting it in good places. It's just goalies are stopping it. He's actually missing the net less often than last year, which is surprising because I think when you're not scoring, you miss the net, people like make note of it, right? Mm-hmm. But he's getting into good areas. He's shooting from better spots than last year. He has increased his like expected finishing ability every single year that he's been in the league now. So he's working hard to get it done. It's just not working. And I don't think there's anything that we can find statistically to explain what's going on with Cole Caulfield. I don't know if it's an adjustment from the shoulder surgery, that maybe it takes a year to figure that out. You look at, I believe when Josh Anderson came back from his shoulder surgery, that was the year he scored 1 goal, right? It was like in 20 games. And I know Josh Anderson's not a good example because he's kind of doing the same thing this year, but maybe it's just a year where things don't go well for Cole Caulfield. But I look at where he's shooting, the power on his shot, the accuracy. I'm not worried about him going forward. I don't think he's going to get to like 30 this year just because it's been a nightmare of a year for him. But I look at the playmaking that he's added to his game, the defensive play he's added to his game, and the shots haven't gone down. They haven't gotten less dangerous. He's not on the perimeter more. Next season, he's going to score 40. As long as he can stay healthy. That's the only concern that I have, and that's just because once in a while guys go after him, and I think there's pushback from the Canadiens, but there might need to be a little bit more sometimes.
And it's really tough to score goals consistently. I mean, let's face it; those guys that do that each and every year are elite, and Cole Caulfield is an elite goal scorer. He is in a little bit of a funk right now. I'd be more concerned, obviously, if he was kind of, on the outside, not doing much as far as, chances for. He is getting chances. Unlike last year, things were going in. Everything he touched seemed to be going to the right spot. So he's a kind of skilled sniper. He always brings something when he's on the ice. He's always a threat. And he's always going into those areas where he's, has an opportunity to score. Not happening right now, but I believe that, the kid will find his scoring touch once again. He won't be going through this drought for hopefully not too much longer because he feels it, he knows it, and he wants to score because that's what he does.
Well, one of the shots he had against Columbus, a good chance to hit the goalie off the top of the shoulder. I don't think the goalie even saw it. Like, he got the shot off so quick and it just hit him. That's bad luck. I mean, but like none of us would have predicted at this point in the season, Nick Suzuki would have 25 goals, 6 more than Cole Caulfield. But I don't think anybody would have predicted either that Cole Caulfield with 33 assists would have only 3 less assists than Nick Suzuki. So right. Everybody focuses on his shot, and he's paid that money to score goals, not to get assists. But everybody focuses on his shot, which is elite. But his stick handling and his playmaking is also really good for Cole Caulfield. And while he's not scoring, he is setting up more goals than I think any of us would have anticipated.
Well, that's it for us this week. Thank you so much for joining us here on Hockey Inside Out. Make sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and go to montrealgazette.com/newsletters to sign up for the Hockey Inside Out newsletter and check out hockeyinsideout.com for all your daily Habs coverage. We'll see you right here next week.